The Baltimore Ravens, the 2012 Super Bowl champions, defending their title in the 2013 campaign, but seem not to make the playoffs with an 8-8 record. They go 3-3 in their division, 6-6 in the AFC. As I'm Robert Diaz, alongside me Nick Rice for another edition of NFL Team Breakdowns. This is the AFC North Division. We have already covered the Cleveland Browns. Now we move on to the Baltimore Ravens. And Nick, the 2013 campaign, what went wrong for the Baltimore Ravens?
Well, you take a look statistically, and I think two things really pop out at you. The first, they really suffered big time with the loss of almost every starter last year, or 2012, on the Super Bowl champion Ravens squad. Almost every starter on the defensive side was no longer with the team, and most notably that linebacking core took a huge beating. Now, they revamped that during this offseason, but when you take a look at the Ravens' 2013 campaign, it's the defense that really let them down. And on the offensive side, it was their inability to they got the yardage that they were looking for. They actually were a relatively good offense. They were near the top half of the league, but the problem is their running game down in the red zone. They settled for a lot of field goals because that rushing attack was not all that scary at all. They averaged 3.1 yards a carry, as Ray Rice, he's seemingly putting more issues off the field than big plays on it.
You know, the running game was a really big concern for me, and Ray Rice struggled throughout throughout the whole season. Bernard Pierce didn't really help out the cause, but what the Ravens got during the offseason was a Justin Forsett who should be helping them out, and I think that's going to make a big difference. But the 2013 campaign, you know, they had a Jacoby Jones who got hurt throughout the season. That really hurt them, and only played 12 games this season, but really the main guy you looked at was Torrey Smith. He had over 1,000 yards receiving, and that was your only big target wide receiver. And it's just hard to see this team really not do that well. And then Dennis Pitta only played 4 games due to injury, but they did get an Owen Daniels this offseason. But Nick, this offense, I mean, they struggled because they just had a lot of injuries, and Ray Rice didn't perform what everyone thought he would have. And I thought he would have been a lot better. I mean, he only had 660 yards rushing. I think he could have at least 800 if he was a little bit better. He played 15 games throughout the season, and just the struggles for him really hurt. Losing Ray Lewis, that was hard. It's kind of losing a Tony Gonzalez from the Atlanta Falcons. But, I mean, it's going to be hard to see this team come back, but I don't think their linebacking core was too bad. I think the D-line kind of hurt as well, and the secondary, well, there wasn't really too much to say about that either. This team just struggled. I think this whole team just struggled, and there wasn't really like a strong suit throughout this whole team.
Obviously nobody stepped up on the 2013 Ravens. When you take a look at Joe Flacco, his statistics, he finished the season with 19 touchdowns and 22 interceptions. Reminds you a little bit of Eli Manning back in 2009. And you can even add 2006, the 2 years before, obviously, the 2 championships that the Giants had. The Ravens are awfully reminiscent of the New York Giants back in the early goings with Tom Coughlin, where basically the Ravens under John Harbaugh, they average around 9 to 10 wins a season when you take a look at that career under Harbaugh. But that championship run, they just always seem to catch a lightning in the bottle at the most critical time. And you got to believe that Baltimore, if they believe that with their free agents and the draft, they certainly got more talent, you got to believe that maybe the Ravens can do it one more time in the postseason.
I think this team could maybe come back, but I mean the schedule's tough, Nick. I mean in the beginning they're gonna go against a lot of hard teams, and looking at their schedule, it's really tough to tell what you could tell a win and a loss is, because this team I think is actually gonna be better this year. I think out of all the free agent acquisitions and the draft they had, I think they're putting together the right pieces, but I don't think this is gonna be a team just yet to make the playoffs. But the AFC North, it's different, but we covered the Browns. I said they go a 7-9, and that's a team that's just bringing up young talent as they go. But when you look at the Ravens, they kind of are. They kind of have the young and the old mixed. And I think it's a good strategy in my opinion, just because you have veterans helping out the young guys. C.J. Mosley in the first round, that was a great pickup for the Baltimore Ravens. But 2013, it's hard to. I thought this team would have been a lot better. I mean, 8-8, it's not too bad. It's not like you had a losing record, but it should have. I think they could have gone at least 9-7 this season.
Yeah, I mean, just the talent departure. A lot of starters left the building, and to be honest, when you take a look statistically, they even lucked out to go 8-8. They won a lot of games by extremely close margins, including games against real lackluster opponents. I mean, they beat Miami by a field goal. They had 2 overtime games, including a win against the Bengals, 20-17. They beat the Steelers by 2, and then they ended up beating the Lions by 2. So when this team wins, a lot of their victories come by extremely close margins, 4 games by a field goal or less. And when you take a look at their games against the best teams in the NFL, at the Denver Broncos, they lose by 22 points. And then their other big-time matchup was against the New England Patriots. They lost 41-19. So against the big opponents, 41-7, my bad. They lost even worse than I thought. So when they play the top dogs of the NFL, they don't show up.
They don't. They didn't really have a tough schedule either. I mean, the only playoff teams they had was Green Bay, Denver, and New England and Cincinnati. But Cincinnati got eliminated the first round by the Chargers. But they had the only close game they had and they had the loss was against Green Bay. But besides that was really it. And that team just struggled. Their longest losing streak was 3, and it was weeks 7, 9, and 10 because they had a bye during week 8. But 6, 7, and 9 was when they had that 3-game losing streak. But Nick, this is Baltimore Ravens. It's going to be a hard season to predict because they have even a harder schedule. This isn't going to be too easy for them.
Yeah, you know what I really think, and I mean, I could obviously be wrong. It's hard to predict a lot of the free agents that they brought in, and also include the draft. Is there are a lot of guys that are they don't quite have a whole lot under their belt. But when you take a look at the guys that they brought in, I think the Ravens improved talent-wise, except for at the running back position. I mean, their running game, I believe, is going to still be pretty bad, one of the worst in the league. It was pretty sad in 2013. Now you throw in the allegations and the fact that they didn't really draft anyone high or anything like that. I don't know. But when you look at that Baltimore team as a whole, I think the talent has improved, but the schedule and the teams they're going to face have improved as well. So that's where I look at this schedule and I say, listen, they have a shot to win at least 2 or 3 games in their division when you add Cleveland in the mix. But against the top dogs, and they face a lot of them, they face teams like the Saints on the road. They play the Panthers, and they also take a trip to the Bengals as well. Obviously a divisional opponent, but still very good. And then at Indianapolis. Listen, Baltimore, it may be tough to even get 8 wins, but then you look at the other side of the spectrum, the talent has increased, and you're not playing the Broncos this year. That should be awfully encouraging for them.
And Nick, I don't know if you noticed, but they had their free agents, and they kind of lost some big names. You lost in Ed Dixon. You also lost Jameel McClain. You lost Michael Orr, who was really talented on that O-line. Jameel McClain. Vontae Leach, who was a pretty good fullback, but he got released, fortunately. And it's hard to see some of these players go. Corey Graham, for example, that was your best corner on that squad. You lose him, and he goes to the Bills now. I don't know, the Ravens, this team is getting rid of some good players. I mean, you kept Dennis Pitta. I mean, you kept Julio Jones. And they kept some good big names there, but they kept Monroe as well on that O-line. That was probably your most talented tackle on that team for the O-line. And he's a big piece of your offense, but man, Nick, I look at some of the people they gave up, and it's hard to see them go. I think the biggest loss they had was Corey Graham, because that's secondary. I don't know where they're going with that right now.
Oh, yeah. Actually, one quick thing I did want to point out here before we do touch on this, and I am intrigued by their transaction period. We'll get to that in a moment, folks. But Torrey Smith, the wide receiver for Baltimore, he caught 1,100 yards, 65 catches, 4 touchdowns last year. He's definitely going to have to step up in that receiving corps. No Anquan Bolden, no Dennis Pitta last year. They still had to rely a lot on him, and it took him a while to get into the fold. Only 4 scores the entire season. They actually had to rely a little bit on a guy by the name of Marlon Brown. There are about 2 or 3 guys in this offense that are definitely going to have to step up, and also include the retirement of Dallas Clark. And you got a receiving corps, a bunch of unheralded players who really need to step into the fold. Now you look over to that Ravens, not only at the receiver corps, but also, as you mentioned, the cornerback unit. Corey Graham is huge, but they signed a guy that I like, Robert. I don't know if you know much about him, but former New York Giant Aaron Ross. He comes over on a short free agent contract, and I think he's going to make a big impact in a big way.
I agree with you on that. I think Aaron Ross is going to come over and I think he's going to help out this team, but also a guy you got to look at is Gary Kubiak, the offensive coordinator coming from Houston. Nick, I think he's going to really help out this offense. I think that, he's bringing over Owen Daniels, the tight end from a former Houston Texan, and I think what he's going to do is really help out the wide receiver corps and the tight ends, and get Flacco some more weapons out there. I mean, last season he struggled with injuries, and that's why Joe Flacco struggled with 19 touchdowns and 22 interceptions. We have Gary Kubiak that's going to pretty much be in the big fold. And when you sign a Steve Smith from the Carolina Panthers, I think this team's not looking too bad on the offensive side. And to be honest, I think Gary Kubiak, is a big steal. But I mean, too bad he was fired last year. But the Texans did finish 2-14, and I don't even know what the Texans are doing over there. I mean, even getting rid of Gary Kubiak, I don't think was very smart. But I think he's regarded as one of the better offensive-minded coaches in the NFL, and he's coached 3 Super Bowl winning teams as an assistant coach, Nick. So let's just throw that out there.
He comes into a system that's very similar to what the Houston Texans had, except maybe even better, as a guy coming over, maybe a little bit of a better receiving core than what Houston had. Torrey Smith, we mentioned, he definitely needed to step up, but a guy who signed a huge contract, and I mean, you mentioned steals. How about former Carolina Panthers Steve Smith coming over to the Ravens? He will make a big impact. You got to believe that him alongside a Torrey Smith and a Marlon Brown create a 1-2-3 receiving core, and also throw in Jacoby Jones. Don't forget about him. He had in 2013, he was able to snag, that was 37 catches, 455 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So he's a player as the number 4 overall receiver that should make a big impact. And Gary Kubiak knows a little about the former Texan Jones.
And Nick, he does bring a lot of veteran leadership. In 13 seasons with the Panthers, Smith has had 836 receptions for 12,197 yards and 75 touchdowns. And his 2013 numbers, 62 catches for 745 yards. And I know it's not as great as Torrey Smith, but still, when you add in a Steve Smith, I think this team is looking pretty good. I know he's not going to be the main target when you have Dennis Pitta, and now you add in Owen Daniels to that offense. I think this team has some pretty solid weapons. And that offense, I think Joe Flacco, is going to really turn. I think he's really going to turn next season around, especially what his numbers look like from last season. They're going to improve a lot better.
Yeah, it's kind of like a kid coming to a candy store when you just finally have an opportunity to see what you've long been waiting for. The Ravens, ever since Anquan Bolden was gone, and actually, I mean, since Joe Flacco has come to the team, it's been quite a long time since he's had a couple of receivers where he can just chuck it up in the air and his big-time targets can come down with it. Even throw in Steve Smith, he has an opportunity to snag the ball out of the air. He should bring some veteran leadership if he has nothing. He didn't even catch as many touchdowns as he did last year. He still is a viable portion of that Ravens offense. Now, when we take a look at the defensive side, a couple of players that I believe should be able to step up is a guy by the name of Daryl Smith. He's still getting it done, a wily old veteran, and also the former Broncos. Tough time getting after the quarterback, as their leader, Terrell Suggs, only had 10 sacks, and that was the best they could do. This was a team that allowed one of the worst
service centers?
Worst yardage totals in the NFL against the pass, and about that Ravens secondary, even with Corey Graham now out of the lineup and Aaron Ross in.
Well, Nick, also look at the first-round draft pick, C.J. Mosley. He entered the draft ranked as the top inside linebacker and one of the best overall linebacker prospects. And, Nick, I think they got a steal with this guy. I think C.J. Mosley is going to come into this defense and really just help out Dumervil. You also got Daryl Smith. Daryl Smith, man, what a man. 123 tackles. I know a lot of guys don't want to talk about this linebacking core. I don't think they're too bad. I think Dumervil, this guy had 9.5 sacks, not too bad. And he's actually going to add on weight over this offseason, I heard, just to get a little bit bigger. He comes from SoCal. And now with him in the lineup, I think when you have Elvis Dumervil, Daryl Smith, C.J. Mosley, and Terrell Suggs, I think that's a pretty scary linebacking core. And Terrell Suggs had 80 tackles last season. This linebacking core, I think, really helped out this defense. And, Nick, the D-line, I don't really feel like did anything, to be honest with you.
I would kind of hold off on the defensive line. I still think the weakness is the secondary. Now, if C.J. Mosley was a cornerback, I would love the draft pick. It's a typical Ozzie Newsome move to draft a player that you know is going to start for your ball club, but he's not a guy that's going to make an instant impact on that defense. Still, the problem is that the Ravens have starting a young and unheralded Jimmy Smith and a injury-prone Ladarius Webb as the top two cornerbacks there for the Ravens. Now, I believe that Matt Elam in his second year should be able to step up, and a guy that's under the radar of all sorts, that is the former Ram, Darian Stewart. I think he can come in and make an impact. He signed, we're talking free agents. He's a guy that should be able to come in and create an impact as well. They had a nice year out of Arthur Brown, who was the starter a season ago, and now you throw in a C.J. Mosley. The production's a little better there, but I don't know what you're getting at the cornerback position.
Matt Elam, he's a second-year player out of Florida. I think Matt Elam's going to come back and have a good season. We talk about these rookies, Nick, and I feel like these guys are going to have stronger seasons. I think Matt Elam, is going to help out this defense. The free safety right now is Terrence Brooks, Florida State.
Yeah.
And, I haven't seen much of him, so I hope, this is going to be a young safety position. But I think they're going to get better and better in the next couple of seasons. Ladarius Webb, he didn't do too bad. 74 tackles, 2 interceptions. But, you lose Corey Graham, that's gonna hurt your cornerback position for a while. And then you have to add in a Jimmy Smith. Their secondary position is going to be so much different. And, Nick, I don't know how I think the cornerback position is really going to struggle next year. I think that whole secondary, even the safeties. Terrence Brooks is going to be a rookie. And Matt Elam, what his stats were was 77 tackles, 1 interception. But I think Darian Stewart, is kind of that veteran leader you're going to have in that safety position. Maybe he won't start, but he's going to help out that safety position. He struggled only playing 13 games last season with 36 tackles. And he had no interceptions. But, that Rams defense is still pretty good. Besides, they had a struggling Darian Stewart. But, Nick, the cornerback position's probably my biggest concern on this list for the defense. And then my biggest concern for the offense is the running backs.
Definitely, Ray Rice is no longer one of my more favorite players to look out for. I really hope that Bernard Pierce is able to step up. He had a somewhat lackluster year, but also taking a look at perhaps a part of the problem is the offensive line. They were able to snag Jeremy Zutov from Tampa Bay, who should make a pretty good impact. But the rest of the line is relatively the same. Eugene Monroe, former Jaguars, in at left tackle. Kalichi Osamele at left guard. You got Marshall Yonda, a guy that I really like. He's still a relatively young player entering his prime at right guard, and then Ricky Wagner in at right tackle. So those are a couple of players. But guys that I think should be able to come in and create instant impacts are James Hurst and John Urschel, some of the draft picks that the Ravens had. They should be able to make good work on that offensive line. And Robert, while it's not the flashiest of free agent acquisitions and it's not the flashiest of draft picks, I think the Ravens improved what was a weakness there, not only at running back, but also that offensive line. I think they improved throughout the offseason.
Yes, they did, but, I mean, these guys lost Michael Orr. That's, I think that's a concern for me. I really like Michael Orr. He's got that story for him. He had a lot of things going for him, but I think now since you lose Michael Orr from the Ravens, I think it's going to be tough. I like his presence. I mean, I've watched some of the film, and he really helped out the passing game and really helped out Joe Flacco. I think that O-line didn't really help out Ray Rice, but Ray Rice struggled on his own a little bit too. So don't blame the O-line for a lot of the mistakes of that running game. Ray Rice really did struggle. It's not the O-line's fault.
They're relying too much on a guy who's, I believe, a little too small and a little too lean to be playing that long in the National Football League. We've seen it time and again among NFL running backs. They only last about 5 or 6 years, their lifetime, outside of extreme outliers like Adrian Peterson and Marshawn Lynch. Typically, NFL running backs last about 4 or 5 years, which is why I think Bernard Pierce is a better option than Ray Rice right now, but either one of them is not your future halfback where the Ravens used to have I love this guy, Willis McGahee. Ever since they lost him, they have really took a step back in the running department. They ranked 28th in the league in rushing last year and were relatively okay in passing, but with the improvements of the offensive line, I think the Ravens improved somewhat but are still a weak running team, and that offense really struggles even if they have those all-pro receivers.
But I think Eugene Morrow, was a good re-signing for this team. I think just to keep that O-line together, but you couldn't keep Eugene Monroe and Michael Orr, so they decided to get rid of Michael Orr. But man, I hear so much great things about this guy in the blind side. He had such a tough life, and now he's going to move on to a different team. I wonder how that's going to be different for him.
Robert, I know the story is great, and I know he was a starter and was a solid part of the offensive line, but he was no Russell Okung. I mean,
he wasn't that great,
he was above average. But I mean, I think that Eugene Monroe is just as good. Personally,
he's not that bad. I mean, they need an O-line, so I think Eugene Monroe was a good re-signing for this team, but. This O-line's not too bad as long as you help out Joe Flacco. But Joe Flacco still kind of struggled a little bit with the 19 touchdowns and 22 interceptions. But that's mostly just because of not really having much of a wide receiver core throughout that season with a lot of the injuries.
Right.
But Nick, I think we should move on here to the grading of the depth chart.
Fine by me.
I'm cool with that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we can all kind of tell what's going to happen at the quarterback position. He's no elite top 5 QB. Joe Flacco's not a guy that's going to put up 4,000 or put up 5,000 yards. But I think you have a QB, and when you look at the backup as well, Tyrod Taylor, I mean, call me a naysayer, but I think Flacco deserves about a B plus. I mean, we've given A minuses to Matt Ryan. I love Joe Flacco. He has more wins in the playoffs than Ryan, but I just think that he's the better quarterback. Flacco's great, but he's no Tom Brady. I think a B plus is solid there.
I think B plus is a solid there. I think it's going to upgrade his grade, but I think because he has more weapons with the Dennis Pitta, Owen Daniels, Torrey Smith, Steve Smith, and Jacoby Jones. I think their offense will be great, and I think Joe Flacco, he's got to make him look good. So let's see what Joe Flacco can do this season. Give him a B plus. Let's move on to the running back position. You have Ray Rice and Bernard Pierce as your starting two running backs, and Justin Forsett from free agency, and Lorenzo Teleforo from Coastal Carolina. And Nick, the draft pick, Lorenzo Telefero, I don't think he was such a great pick as what Mel Kiper was saying is he deserves a B minus because this guy didn't really play for such a big school and they can't really rely on this guy. But I think an under the radar type of player we're going to be watching out for this season is a Justin Forsett. I think if you give this guy the more carries, I know he's not going to be this 1,000 or more yards type of guy, but I think he's going to be a solid backup. But, he could. I think Ray Rice is in jeopardy for a starting job right now. I think just because of what he struggled with last season.
Yeah, and that doesn't even include the off-the-field issues. If I were the Ravens, I mean, even if he didn't have those allegations, I still would have let him go. I mean, holy cow. You also throw in those allegations and John Harbaugh keeps him on the team. I mean, I was just saying because of the lack of production, you let him go. 3 yards a carry, that is extremely poor for a Ravens running attack based off of what they used to be. Nevertheless, I think a C plus is a solid grade. You got 3 guys that can basically get about 10 carries a game there and be pretty good for the Ravens. I think a C plus is relatively generous for them.
I think it's going to be a C for me. I don't think this running back core is going to be it's not going to be that talented this year. I think they're going to struggle. I think they got to go next year in the draft and find a running back they're looking for. But Nick, let's move on to, I think, a unit that's really going to help out this team, the wide receiver core. Torrey Smith was relied on a lot this season with 65 catches, over 1,000 yards receiving. And then you move on to a Steve Smith that played for the Carolina Panthers, really was the main target for Cam Newton a year ago with 64 catches, 745 yards receiving. And he had 4 touchdowns as well. So him and Torrey shared something a little bit. And then Marion Brown, he had 49 catches for over 500 yards this season receiving. And then Jacoby Jones. He got injured during the season. That's what was a big struggle for the Ravens. They did not have a Steve Smith type of player, and Torrey Smith was the only one you could really rely on throughout the whole season. Jacoby Jones only had 37 catches, 455 yards, and 2 touchdowns this season. Nick, I think I'm going to give him a B. I think they're going to be a productive group for that wide receiver core. And I'm not being generous at all. I think that's just the perfect grade for him. And I really like bringing in a Steve Smith. I think even though a lot of Carolina Panthers are disappointed, it's not really his fault. It's the management fault. He got released. And after 13 seasons, the Panthers were just like, let's let him go. But Steve Smith, I think a veteran leadership will be good.
Yeah, a B plus I think is a solid grade for them because they have playmakers there at the wide receiver position. They have guys that can win, and that leadership's going to be top notch. Look out for Steve Smith having a comeback season.
Oh yeah, we forgot about the fullback position, didn't we?
Yeah, I think it's about a C plus for me too at that position.
I don't want to say his last name. Kyle Juszczyk. I'll give him a C plus. I'll agree with you, but I want to go on to this position. Big free agent acquisition for them, and also a re-signing of a Dennis Pitta, who my bad for the voice crack there, but Dennis Pitta, he got injured during the season. I think that was a kind of a setback for them as well, and that hurt them in the offensive department. But you bring in Owen Daniels from the Houston Texans, and you have a Gary Kubiak for you. I think the tight end position deserves a B as well. I think this isn't this isn't going to be one of the most talented offenses, but I think Joe Flacco just has a lot to throw to. And when you added Dennis Pitta and Owen Daniels, you have some great hands there that can make some great catches and can help out the running back position by getting some great blocks. But Owen Daniels is the guy that can really just use his hands and get some production downfield.
Yeah, I think these are two tight ends that are going to be awfully productive for the Ravens. Dennis Pitta should be an up-and-coming, really good player. Not a Todd Heap, but pretty close to that. B- I think is a great grade for them.
And let's move on to the O-line. Nick, these guys don't look too shabby. As long as you help out Joe Flacco, you're fine. He still had over 3,000 yards passing, but still, besides that, this O-line didn't look too great. But Nick, if I were to give him a grade, I think I'm going to give him a B-. I think this squad is more, they can just help out Joe Flacco, but I think that running game is still going to struggle. As we said, my grade's a C for that. Yours is a C+. I think I'll give the O-line a B-.
Yeah, I think overall a B is a great grade for them because, listen, that offensive line isn't going to scare anybody outside of maybe a Marshall Yonda. But when you take a look at that front five, those are a huge set of people that can definitely create a wall for Joe Flacco. A B is a good grade. And now that you finally have a couple great free agents, don't take a look out for Jeremy Zuttah at center. He should be able to anchor an offensive line that should be much improved from the 22 interceptions and 3 yards a carry they allowed last year for the Ravens.
I think Zuttah is gonna make an impact on that O-line. I think Eugene Monroe, also the re-signing. I think it's important, Nick, but I know you're kind of against it. But I think Eugene Monroe, is a guy that you bring back, and you had to bring at least him or Michael Orr back. And I think Eugene Monroe is, the smarter choice. Now let's move on to the D-line here, and the penciled-in starters are Chris Canty from out of the College of Virginia, Haltoy Najata, who had 52 tackles and 1.5 sacks. Then you also have a Brandon Williams out of Missouri Southern State. Nick, I don't know what you're going to expect from this D-line. I think they're going to struggle in the beginning, but eventually get to know each other throughout the whole season. I think I'm going to give them a B.
A B-, I think, is a great grade for that defensive front. Unheralded, a couple of new players. Chris Canty, former Giant, checks in. Haloti Ngata should be able to anchor that defensive front, but not guys that scare you all that much. Also throw in Timmy Jernigan, a guy that I think is somewhat of a steal, barring some injury concerns, should be an up-and-coming great player. If we're talking 2016, 2017 Baltimore Raven team recap, it'll be a far different story. But at the moment, Timmy Jernigan anchors a B type of an offensive line, B to B-.
No, Timmy Jernigan, I think he was one of the... These guys got C.J. Mosley and Timmy Jernigan just because they really want to help out their defense. These are top 20 type of defensive players in that draft this year. I think Jernigan will eventually become a starter. I think he's going to get a couple of starts this season, but I don't think he's going to be that official starter. But, Jernigan, I think, is an up-and-coming type of star for this team, and I'm glad they had a great draft because that linebacking core, man, they got a big guy I think is going to be starting for them by day one of week one. Well, day one for C.J. Mosley, but at the outside linebacker, you have Terrell Suggs. He had 8 tackles, 10 sacks. C.J. Mosley, who's the rookie for you, and I think he's going to come in and make an impact for you. Then you have Darryl Smith, who had 123 tackles, 5 sacks, and 3 interceptions. Not bad for a right inside linebacker that can really play man coverage and really get to the running back. And then you have Elvis Dumerville, who's packing on some weight over during this off season, but he's he's only 260. And Nick, I don't know how much this guy will get up bigger, but I think he might get up to at least 275. He has 9.5 sacks this season with 31 tackles. Him and Suggs really bring a presence to that quarterback position who's over the opposing team because they are 2 scary guys that you don't want to get sacked by.
Yeah, definitely Terrell Suggs is a man to look out for, which is why I think I give this overall Linebacking core, a B grade. C.J. Mosley's not going to be great in his opening year, but should develop into a real solid starter there for the Baltimore Ravens. And Elvis Dumervil should be relatively good as well. Also, an under-the-radar player to look out for, Courtney Upshaw, the up-and-coming outside linebacker. He was raw coming out of the NCAA, but should make a big impact now as he's become to get into the fold on that depth chart, getting in the rotation, should make a couple of big plays. As last year, Courtney Upshaw, he was a real good part of that pass rush team for the Ravens. He rallied a combined. We're going to take a quick look here. I do want to give the stats. Courtney Upshaw, a sack and a half in 2013.
And he had 30 tackles too. But, out of Alabama, I think, rookies, try to make a big impact as much as they can. And, not all rookies are going to have this terrific season. But, Courtney Upshaw is a guy I think that will eventually become a starter. But, well, actually, he was a starter last season. He played all 16 games. But I think this is a guy that I think he's going to be down that second string for a little bit, kind of learn from that linebacking core. But I think I'm going to give him a B-. I don't think this team is just ready yet, but I know I'm not really giving out low grades because I don't think this team is a C to C+ type of team. Just that running back core scares me, but Nick, I could give this squad a C to a C+ when you look at Ladarius Webb, 74 tackles and 2 interceptions. You lose a Corey Graham. And then now you have a Jimmy Smith with 58 tackles and 2 interceptions. I think I'm giving him a C+. This cornerback position isn't all that great, to be honest with you. I mean, what do they have in Asa Jackson? And then also Chikey Brown. I don't know where the cornerback position's going for this squad at all. I don't know why they didn't want to re-sign a Corey Graham. But, Nick, C+, or even a C. I'm going to give him a C. I don't think this... you can't really rely on this cornerback position this season at all.
Wow, that's a real low grade for them. I give him a C+ because Ladarius Webb is a real nice corner there for the Ravens. He just has absolutely no help. Jimmy Smith could be decent there for the Ravens as the number 2 corner, but when you're going up against that AFC North, when you're talking about A.J. Green and Marvin Jones, this team should be beat like a drum in the secondary. Throw in the Steelers, they have a great 1-2 punch in Antonio Brown and company. And then also, look at the Browns. They're even relatively decent there in the pass. In their passing ability with Josh Gordon leading the pack. So I think overall, this cornerback position is going to really struggle. As they have in quite some years, they will continue to struggle against top offenses.
And let's move on to a young safety position. You have a Terrence Brooks from Florida State. A rookie he's going to be this season, and he's going to supposedly gain the starting nod. You move on to a Matt Elam, who's going to be in his second year for the Baltimore Ravens. He started all 16 games with 77 tackles, 1 interception, and 2 fumble recoveries. Not too bad for a man that had his rookie season. I think this guy's going to keep on improving. The only thing is I think he's still a little undersized, 5'10" guy, but still got the 77 tackles, 1 interception. I think he was one of the better rookies this season, and he really proved it. But Nick, I think I'm going to give him a B. Matt Elam's stats weren't too bad, and I think that's what Terrence Brooks is going to get about throughout this season. And Matt Elam's just going to keep on getting better and better. I think he's going to pack on 2 more interceptions next for this 2014 campaign.
Yeah, it's going to be awfully interesting when you take a look at that safety unit. I think they deserve about I just think a B- is a solid grade for them, where this is just a unit that definitely should be able to come into their own in the future. But right now, I think they're just kind of an average safety unit, should be able to stop a lot of the deep plays, or at least some of them. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for those safeties because these corners are not going to play too good. You got to believe that.
And Nick, let's move on to the special teams. You have Jacoby Jones as your kick returner and your punt returner with long snapper Morgan Cox and Justin Tucker. Justin Tucker you had to rely on mostly throughout the season because that special teams, he was 38 for 41. Not too bad. I think I'm going to give this unit an A-. I really like their special teams. Unfortunately, Jacoby Jones went down Ladarius Webb really had to step up in that special teams.
Yeah, Sam Cook is not all that good of a punter, but when you look at the other specialists, Justin Tucker, I believe, is only second behind Greg the Leg right now in the best kickers in the game. And then you take a look at that returning, and it's not too bad with Ladarius Webb an ability to return as well. B+, solid grade for that special teams. And also to throw this in there, I think the coaching staff is about a B+ as well. Good, but not great. Should be real interesting to see the Ravens next season.
And Nick, we're going to get on to our favorite part here, the schedule. Nick, just some thoughts before we move on to the schedule. What do you think of their schedule this season?
Taking a look at the 2014 schedule, it starts off with 3 straight divisional matchups, which basically could dictate the Ravens season. If they go 0-3 against these ball clubs, then you could kiss the 2014 season goodbye. But I think they'll fare relatively well. The middle portion of the year is awfully tough, and then they have a late bye before rounding out with some easy opponents, the Jags, Texans, Browns, and the Dolphins in the mix. So I think overall the Ravens need to get off to a hot start, and then when the weather gets cold, you have to close out that season. Otherwise, you could be looking at the 2014 playoffs in the exact same place that we are, at home.
Nick, also I want to point out just this schedule. It's not easy when you're going against playoff teams. You're going against the Panthers, the Colts, the Saints, Chargers. I mean, they're not – actually, that's not a lot, but still I think they kind of have a tough schedule, but I think they're going to come back towards the end and get some big W's for them. But, Nick, I think we're almost ready to go here to get that schedule started. We're going to hit the music, and it's on. Let's go. 2014 schedule, week 1. They're playing at home versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Nick, I think they get the win, at home. They're really going to turn it up and get the big W.
I'm actually going to have to disagree with you. I think the Bengals are way too good. I took a look at the 2 meetings last year that these teams had, and the Bengals beat them all over the place in both matchups. Of course, at home, the Ravens won in overtime, but they gave up nearly 400 yards of total offense and only had 189, including next to nothing on the ground, 3 turnovers as well. I'll give the Ravens a big loss here in week number 1 to start the season 0-1.
All right, Nick, now they play the Pittsburgh Steelers at home on a Thursday night football. Nick, this is kind of my toss-up here, but I think I'm going to give them the win here. I think they're going to go 2-0 and really have a great start.
Yeah, it was a toss-up for me as well, but I think they win in a close game against the Steelers, week number 2. They really had to win in order to save their season, according to my book, and they get it done.
All right, Nick, let's move on to week 3. And, Nick, we both said that was a loss, right?
Yes, we both say they lose at the Browns. That would be a huge opening game for Cleveland.
Yes, it would be. And now they move on to week 4 versus the Carolina Panthers. Nick, Steve Smith's returning back to Baltimore, and Carolina's coming to Baltimore, but Steve Smith gets to meet his old team. I think they get the win here.
That would be an absolutely huge story there for the Ravens. I think they get it done. I think it's a win, and it would be close, but Carolina's not the same team that they were a year ago. They get the big-time W and move to 2-2.
And I think they go 3-1, but at Indianapolis, week 5, I think they're going to get the loss here. I think Andrew Luck in that passing game is going to be unstoppable against that cornerback crew.
Yeah, that's the one weakness that I think is too big, too strong there against the Ravens. The first of what I believe will be many losses upcoming for the Ravens.
And then you go at Tampa Bay, and Nick, you have that written down. What do you got?
Week 6, both of us think that they lose at the Buccaneers. Week 7, we both think that they lose against the Atlanta Falcons. So both of Robert and I believe that they lose in 3 straight games before in week number 8. I think, Robert, that they lose to Cincinnati as well. It's at the Bengals, and it's too little too much there for the Baltimore Ravens there at Paul Brown Stadium.
I think we have Andy Dalton and A.J. Green connecting together. I think they're going to lose this game, and Cincinnati gets the big win down in Cincinnati.
Wow, week number 9 at the Steelers, what do you think?
Nick, I think they're going to get the... Damn, this is hard. I just don't think they can sweep Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, I think, is a good team this year. I think this is a team that could eventually win this division, the AFC North, but they're going to get the loss, so that's going to be 5 for me.
It was a toss-up for me as well. It's at the Steelers, Heinz Field, but I still give the Ravens the win, as they just always seem to match up very well against that Pittsburgh team. And also one more thing to look out for, we both think that they lose 4 straight before that game. I just think the Ravens come back and they beat them hard.
So 4-1 in the division, Nick.
Yeah,
no spectacle about that.
The Steelers just do not match up well against them.
I think they do, but... Alright, well, let's move on here, as we got the versus the Tennessee Titans, and after a 5-game losing streak, they get the win at home.
Yeah, I think it's a win. The Ravens are just too good for that Titan team.
And now they have Week 11, which is a bye, and then they're going at New Orleans. The Ravens are facing a tough challenge, and you're in New Orleans. I don't think you're going to get the win. That's a loss for the Ravens.
Yeah, I think it's a loss too. They come off the bye. They never seem to be all that good after a bye. Last year they started 1-2 following the bye week and lost to some pretty bad opponents. So I don't think the Ravens have all it takes to come back strong.
And Nick, what do you have for Week 13?
Week 13, I think they beat the Chargers. Meanwhile, you think that the Chargers pull out the win over the Ravens.
All right, well, let's move on to Week 14, as they're going to be playing Week 14, they're going to be playing at Miami. Nick, I think they're going to get a big win. I think this is their one big game on the road. They get it done.
At the Dolphins, they always seem to struggle against Miami. They barely squeaked out a win last year. This time they barely lose to the Dolphins on a last-second play, and they fall with going 1-2 after the bye week, just like last year.
All right, let's move on. You have a game versus Jacksonville, and Nick, I think at home they're going to get the win. I think they're going to go 2-0 on Week 14 and 15.
Yeah, I think they win too. It's just the town's too big against that Jacksonville team.
All right, then let's move on. They're going to at Houston, and Houston really struggling to find answers there. Starting QB is Ryan Fitzpatrick. And, I just don't see this. I see this team beating Houston like they did last year.
Yeah, same here. Week 16, I know it's on the road, but Baltimore at this point may be looking for a playoff berth, so they get a big win. And the Ravens always seem to play a little bit better in early December, just like the season ago. I think they get it done.
All right, Nick, and then what do you have for Week 17?
Week 17, a huge upset. I think the Ravens lose at home to the Browns and are knocked out of the postseason with that game. Meanwhile, Robert, you think that they win. They go 4-0 in the month of December by beating the Browns in the last week of the season.
All right, well, you have our prediction, folks. I have tallied up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
Did
7.
you have them winning in Week 8?
No, I have them getting the loss.
Losing. Okay, all right. That's what I thought.
So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 8. Again.
8-8 again. I have them at 7-9.
That's not too bad. I think that's how they're gonna. I don't think they're gonna make the playoffs though.
Yeah.
I think it's a toss-up. To be honest with you, I think there's some of those wins are toss-ups. So, I think they're gonna go. To be honest, like they could go 8-8 or 7-9. It's gonna be tough. I think it's the first 3 weeks. It all depends on how they do. I think they could maybe lose week 1. They could.
Yeah, that's your kind. That's the interesting game that you have, as you had the Ravens starting 3-1 and then go on a 5-game losing tear before winning at the Titans and then 2 straight losses out of the bye. So you have an extremely brutal middle portion of the season where between weeks 5 and 13 they only go 1-7. Awfully interesting for Baltimore.
Baltimore is just a team that's gonna really. I don't know. I'm not saying I don't know. I don't know why I'm saying that, but I think it's their passing. I think the passing game is really gonna carry this offense. So Joe Flacco, they have a starting quarterback. They have a franchise QB. That's what a team needs, and I think that's what makes teams successful in the NFL. And when you have that QB problems, it doesn't really help you out. I guess the Niners, when they were in that 2012 Super Bowl, yes, they switched quarterbacks. It worked out just fine. And well, they did lose to the they lost in the Super Bowl to the Baltimore Ravens. But besides that, I mean, I like this team. I think they're going in a. I think the cornerback position needs to go in a different direction. The safety position, starting off young, Darian Stewart was a good pickup in the veteran leadership, and the O-line, I think, is going to be all right. I think they could have added one more piece. In the tight end position, I think Dennis Pitt and Owen Daniels, two guys that kind of had struggled with injuries last season, I think are going to come back. I think they're going to have good careers with the Baltimore Ravens. And then you got Steve Smith, Torrey Smith, and Jacoby Jones. I think those three are going to be pretty good. I think Torrey Smith and Steve Smith are those 1-2 punch you need in that wide receiver core.
Yeah, just to recap, the Ravens went 8-8 last year, and in our prediction, we think that they get right around the same record because overall, I think it was the theme of the beginning of the show. The Ravens, they had an off season, but that may be a story of things to come because I think the Ravens finished 7-9. They get maybe a little bit more talented in some areas, but that halfback position is a concern. And you take a look at that, obviously 28th in rushing, that's not going to get it done. And then their inability to stop the pass. They did rank 13th in the league against the pass, but the problem is that in a lot of games, especially against the great teams, they were out of it by halftime. It started in week number 1 at the Broncos. They fell behind early and were never able to make it up. So that's why they didn't exactly have all that great of a record overall. They beat a lot of teams that basically they should have won anyways, and against the playoff squads, they really came up flat, which is why I think they don't even hit 8-8 next year because they lost a lot of great talent. We're talking about their offensive lineman Michael Orr, and then Corey Graham, two of the better players on the team. And I don't think Joe Flacco is an elite top 5 thrower, which really takes a hit on that passing attack.
Well, what do you think of Eli Manning? Because you just said Eli Manning had those comeback seasons. Can Joe Flacco make that kind of a comeback this season in the 2014 campaign?
He can, but also take a look at the guys that they had running the football. He had a complete offense, unlike the Ravens, where they ranked 28th in rushing, and they did nothing to improve it outside of maybe an offensive lineman or two. Running back position still the same. Your tight ends are still basically the same. That's part of the offensive line. I guess you could throw that in there. And overall, I don't think the defense is going to be a whole lot different. Because when you take a look at the defensive numbers, they ranked relatively well last year, and they still lost a lot of games by huge margins. So even if you improve that defense, which, in some eyes they did, still I think 7-9 is a solid record. Flacco may improve, but that defense may take a step back.
My records are always kind of like toss-ups. Like, to be honest with you, like some games if I pick, I just do heads or tails. Wins or loss there because it's too hard to decide.
It's a weird way to think.
It's a weird way to think it, but there's also
a weird way to tell the audience that you basically know what you're doing.
Hey, I know what I'm doing. It's just
I'm sure you do.
There's good competition, and that AFC North, it's gonna come down to the wire. But Pittsburgh, man, I think they have a good shot this year. I think they're the best team in this division.
Yeah, that's obviously the coin flip, the Ravens and the Steelers matchup, as is every year. Hopefully Mike Tomlin stays in bounds throughout the duration of these two contests for 2014. But one thing that we always do on the National Sports Broadcasting Facebook page, make sure to tune in to facebook.com / National Sports Broadcasters and take a look at that. They're under the groups page on Facebook. But we always do 3 things, let alone the predictions for the record of the team. We take a look at who we think is the best player, the under-the-radar performance in the free agent of 2014. I think overall the best free agent they got was Steve Smith, no question. under the radar performance, Aaron Ross, the free agent acquisition by the Giants. And then the best player, listen, the offensive line as a whole has really struggled, but I love Marshall Yanda. He's a tough, tenacious player who basically embodies the old Baltimore Ravens style. It's been somewhat of a distant memory, which is real sad to see the Baltimore Ravens being an afterthought. They just won the Super Bowl less than 2 years ago, but Marshall Yanda headed that attack in 2012. He was the reason for the season for the Ravens.
Nick, okay, so my best, I think the under the radar is going to be Elvis Dumerville on the right side for that defense, the right side linebacker. I think he's going to get a couple more sacks and a little bit more tackles. A lot of people don't really know about him, which is kind of sad because he's actually a pretty good player, pretty talented. Watching some of his film, he really knows how to get to the quarterback, and he can be pretty scary if you don't cover him. Let's see, best free agent acquisition. This is actually a good one, but if I had to pick one, I say Steve Smith because that wide receiver core is going to look even better this year. I think that's why they're getting such a good grade. I mean, I'm giving them a B, but I think they could be a B plus, A minus by the end of that season. I think Joe Flacco's going to find out, he's going to know what he's going to be doing. And then what else did we say? What's the other one?
The best player on the team.
Best player. All right. This is actually a good one, to be honest with you. Man, I like this. Man, Nick, this is really hard. I think I'm gonna give it to. Jeez, dude, this is hard. Damn. Okay, well, wait.
Okay, I'm gonna give you an option. Okay,
just give me an option. Just give me an option.
It's either Joe Flacco, Steve Smith, Torrey Smith, Marshall Yanda, Haloti Nada, or Ladarius Webb. One of the five.
Not Ladarius Webb.
Ladarius Webb?
No.
Okay.
No, not at all.
Haloti Nada?
No.
Okay, Torrey Smith?
I think I'll give it to Torrey Smith. I think Torrey Smith, Nick, he said he had to bring up a bigger role, and I think he's going to figure that out. In training camp, and I think he's going to be a way better wide receiver. I mean, I know he's got Steve Smith now, but I think these guys are going to – I think Torrey Smith is going to carry more of the load, but Steve Smith's going to be there to help out Joe Flacco. Torrey Smith might get double covered. You never know. But when you have Steve Smith, he's going to be a threat. And I bet Carolina's going to regret getting rid of him.
Yeah, see, actually one thing that I do want to add, and we never do this, the best player on the team, hands down, is Justin Tucker. But I don't want to put a kicker on the best player of 2014. But Justin Tucker is perhaps one of the top 2 or 3 players in that division. Absolutely ridiculous. Just set, I believe, the NFL record, or maybe tied it for the longest field goal on the season. In a game, I guess of all time. So it's awfully interesting. And then one more point that I want to give the Baltimore team, Flacco. I'm looking at his stats. He passed 614 times last year. And when you take a look at a game-by-game statistic on how much Flacco threw, and that accounts for the 22 picks, but, Flacco threw, that is 38 to 39 times a game. And they only handed the ball off about 15 to 20 times a game. So obviously way out of balance, and they need to fix that. And I don't think they did. I think that's the big issue that the Ravens failed to address.
Well, the running back position is going to be a struggle. You got Joe Flacco throwing the ball like crazy. But
listen, you don't need to spend a fortune. Ben Tate signed a 3-year, $10 million deal. I believe Ray Rice is making all of what Tate's making in 1 year. You didn't have to go out and get a superstar. I think Ben Tate or a Donald Brown, maybe a Rashad Jennings, there were guys on the market, but you got none of them.
I think Rashad Jennings is going to be good for the Giants. We talked about some of these guys already, which is what I like. Ben Tate and Rashad Jennings, those guys are going to be pretty good for those teams. I think for the Browns, he's going to get a lot of touches. Because if they have Johnny Football starting, man, I think you got to give Ben Tate a lot more carries. And Rashad Jennings, he might not get a lot because Eli Manning is a passing type of quarterback, and they're kind of in that unit where they rely on the wide receivers more. But, Nick, Justin, they got Justin Forsett. I don't know how much of an impact he'll make, to be honest with you. I don't think he'll make a ton. I think he's going to help them out a little bit, but he's not that guy you can rely on every down.
Yeah, obviously something cause for concern. I mean, they're going to have to rely on Joe Flacco again, but he does have some receivers, so I'm not going to be overly concerned. The Ravens rank 16th in passing, 28th in rushing. Take a look for that running attack to be right around the same, but that passing attack may improve and help them out of some big-time games.
Yeah, the running game was one of the worst in the NFL. The worst one was actually the Atlanta Falcons we just covered. They just had injuries. Ray Rice was healthy all season long. No excuses at all. But, man, it's sad to see this team after a 2012 Super Bowl victory, not even make the playoffs at all. But that's what happened to some teams. Like, let's do, for example, the San Francisco Giants. They won the World Series in 2010. Did they do anything in 2011? No, not really. Nothing really happened there. Then they turn around in 2012 and get that World Series. Could that happen to the Ravens? We don't know. That's what I love about the NFL.
I don't think this team's talent. I mean, we're talking. At the end of after the Super Bowl, we were saying that this was potentially the worst team that just won a Super Bowl because that talent. They left a lot of starters go following the Super Bowl run. They put all the chips on the table and they got it done. But I mean, this isn't something that you can expect to have with regularity. I'm actually taking a look, according to BleacherReport.com, of the top quarterbacks in the game, and also NFL Network does the top 100. Matt Ryan, according to Bleacher Report, is number 9, and Joe Flacco is ranked. I'm trying to take a look here, looking down the list, way down the list. There's no way he's in the top 5. I didn't take a look at the top 5. They have Joe Flacco ranked 27th behind Chad Henne, Thaddeus Lewis of the Bills, Brian Hoyer, and Carson Palmer.
It's kind of
throw
sad.
in Jake Locker as well. I don't know about that.
Jake Locker is awful.
Yeah,
not gonna lie about
that. Yeah, I love Bleacher Report. Don't get me wrong, but sometimes
they're really biased.
Yeah, they
very,
can be
very biased towards the Buccaneers. Try to research, and all they would give for their draft grades was an A. Like, is there any other grades you can give these guys? I mean, they were literally just saying, "Oh, he's so great. There's no negatives about him." Like, there's always negatives about a player. You cannot say.
Real solid draft.
You cannot say.
Evans kid, he should be something.
That's what I don't like. Like, you guys can't say he's a bust. Like, you can't say he's a potential bust. It's like, it pisses me off when some people don't, do that. Like, there are players that are busts, and Bleacher Report doesn't want to, admit that sometimes. Like, okay, if there's, just the NFL news, those guys are actually legit. If it's just a team report, they do, a discussion about the team, they're all analysts about the Buccaneers, they're all just going to be biased against them. They're going to be like, hey, oh, you know what? Who's going to be a good quarterback? Mike Glennon. I think he's going to get the starting job, and he's going to have an A-plus type of job, A-plus type of career. Calm down. It's Mike Glennon we're talking about. Not a top 10 quarterback whatsoever. You guys are just making a big deal out of this. Now, maybe Vincent Jackson is a pretty elite type of guy, but it's Bleacher Report needs to take it easy over there.
Chill. Yeah, obviously, Bleacher Report may be a little biased because they ranked Peyton Manning, obviously, number 1. Everyone did. Number 2 is Phillip Rivers. Obviously, just I think overly
comeback
biased.
Year.
But I do think that Matt Ryan is better than Joe Flacco. The Falcons got the better quarterback in that 2007 NFL draft. Obviously, a draft for the ages because the 2 quarterbacks were taken 1 and 2. Same with Luck and Robert Griffin, but I think we can already tell who's the better quarterback. But overall, obviously, Ravens, with Flacco, I think they'll be good. It's just, listen, man, Flacco signed that huge deal, and for the next 5 years, the Ravens are not winning the Super Bowl. Not with Joe Flacco under center. There's no way. It's similar to Kobe Bryant signing the huge deal. Just way too much money to him for so little production. I don't think the Ravens are going to be all that good.
Nick, you're you're hurting me inside a little bit. I think the Ravens are not. They're not a bad team. They just have some issues.
That's what I'm saying.
In the next 5 years, they'll improve that running game, and then the next 5 years, that cornerback position will be better. I think in like 3,
I mean, but also
give them
take a look
4.
at the linebacking core. Darryl Smith, 32 years old. Elvis Dumervil, 32 years old. Ladarius Webb, 29. Still an old defense, even without Ray Lewis.
Okay, yes, they're old, but they're still making an impact. I think that linebacking core isn't bad. They can play, they play. Nick, that's what I think. Ray Lewis still played, still did pretty damn well for being old. A lot of people give crap to players that are old, but if they can get production, they get production. Frank Gore's old. Yeah. He's not even supposed to be in the league. He's supposed to be retired. He's still playing. He's playing like a star. I hate when. Yeah. Okay, maybe I'm going a little too far, but what I'm trying to say is, old players are not that bad. Tom Brady and Peyton Manning are old. Are they still playing pretty well? Yeah, they are. Peyton Manning's the #1 quarterback in this league. Jeez, I hate when people say old players can't play and they can. Jeez. Sorry, that just makes me mad, dude. Grinds my gears.
It's interesting how Peyton Manning, the #1 story about him, it has nothing to do with 55 touchdowns, nothing to do with going all the way to the Super Bowl, the #1 offense in the NFL all time. But it's about when are you going to retire? Like how much longer are you going to play before you hang it up? I mean, geez, of all the questions to ask.
I mean, Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, I think, are going to retire like together. But okay,
I know that'll be so interesting.
That'll be
Same
funny.
day. You know what? Let's just call it quits.
I think if one of them wins the Super Bowl this year, they're done. And I think the best shot right now to maybe make that Super Bowl run, the Pats. I think that's the best AFC team right now. But I think
you know what would be so awesome?
What would be
awesome? In like 3 years, Tom Brady gets released from the Patriots. He gets picked up on a 1-year deal by the Seahawks, by like the Niners, or a really good team, right, in the NFC. And Manning and Brady play in the Super Bowl in the final game, and it goes to overtime for the first time in NFL history in the Super Bowl. And then whoever wins, they both retire at the same time. I'm coming straight from Disneyland.
Hey, you know what's funny about that, Nick?
What?
In Madden 25, he gets released. I picked him up with the Rams. It's been like 3 years right in the league. I have like a solid wide receiver core. I like simmed the whole season, and I won the Super Bowl with Tom Brady for just 1 year, and he retired after that.
Yeah, it's awfully interesting. Tom Brady signed a 5-year, $70 million contract in 2013. So look out. Listen to this broadcast in 2018, fellas. When he's 40 years old, he'll play for one more season for the best team in the NFC and play Manning in the Super Bowl. Just watch out.
I think I wonder how big his contract will be. That'll be interesting to find out. But Nick, we gotta wrap it up here. And also one more thing I want to add before we end it. Comeback Player of the Year for this squad, Dennis Pitta. Watch out. I think that's just a good statement to say. But Nick, final thoughts before we go.
I know. After injury, there's so many.
Looks like we lost Nick here.
I agree with your Dennis Pitta statement.
Oh, he does agree with the Dennis Pitta statement, which is awesome to hear. But let's wrap it up. We're on Facebook at NFL Team Breakdowns. Nick's always upstate the document, and you guys can always check it out. It's always good to look at once in a while. You can disagree with us. We love comments from our fans. Got to give a shout out to Brett Rappaport. I know he's been listening. He's actually originally from New York, but he's a big NFL type of fan. His favorite team's the New York Giants. He was happy when we covered them and gave us some feedback, and he always does. So, and he says we're doing a good job, Nick. So we got to keep it up.
Yay.
So, well, let's wrap it up here from NFL Team Breakdown Studio on Spreaker.com. I'm Robert Dieters. Alongside me, Nick Rice. Nick, another great show. And what's our next team?
Our next team, tune in to NFL team breakdowns to take an inside look of the Carolina Panthers, a team that we touched on earlier in the show, and basically a squad that can win that division. But look out for the Saints and the Falcons. Do they have enough firepower, especially at wide receiver, to get it done in the division? That all comes up next time here on National Sports.
We want to thank you for listening, and have a great night.